Um, so everyone watching, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are very glad to have you here for the factory floor fallacy. Why accounting firms are about to repeat the biggest mistakes of the Industrial Revolution. We've got a great session lined up, so let's jump in with some quick introductions. Um, for those of you who've been on some of our webinars recently, you might know me. My name is Christopher Witt. I am our Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Suralink, and I have spent the last 20 years of my career in SaaS technology, specifically fintech, financial technology, with a principal focus on the accounting space across several companies. And I've been privileged to be a technologist in this fascinating industry for some time. But I am merely our host for today's soiree, and I am thrilled to be joined by someone much more charming and credible than I, and that would be Dimitar. So, Dimitar, please.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the kind words. Um, Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where in the world you are. I am Dimitar Stanimiroff, General Manager for EMEA at Suralink. Quick admission, I'm actually not an accountant. I've spent 15 plus years scaling technology businesses across Europe, including some household names like Handshake, Stack Overflow, to mention a few. And actually, that outside the perspective is exactly what I would like to talk to you today about. So I'll leave it at that, but you'll hear more from me shortly.
Okay. Thank you. We're also getting some notifications there may be some sound issues for the webinar. Please comment in the questions and answer if you're getting that. Might try reloading your Zoom, however. Okay. All right. Glad to have you here, Dimitar. Um,
Yes.
Here is how the next 20 or 30 minutes are going to go. We're going to have a frank and rather fun, in my opinion, exploration of another era-defining leap in technology and a look at how, honestly, misunderstandings of its use and, more importantly, accurate implementation cost companies adoption and ultimately ROI. Um, we will discuss what lessons that I think we all can learn from this and in our modern era, the specific strategies for AI that will ensure that we do not repeat those same mistakes as we're entering this new age of era-defining tech, and really what that means, honestly, for practitioners and firms. And if this discussion intrigues you and you would like to talk more about it, specifically about how Suralink is directly applying those strategies directly into our solutions today, right now, or to even see it in action for your audit practice, please reach out. All you need to do is email us sales@suralink.com or just scan the QR code right here on the screen and one of our reps will be in touch. And as this session progresses, you may have Q&A. Uh, uh, you want to ask us, and that's great. There's a Q&A section right here in Zoom. So time permitting, we should have time to answer some of your questions. And if we don't get to, we will reach out to you to answer. So, Dimitar, we've got a heady discussion ahead of us. Era-defining technology. That's a bold statement. Um, Mistakes in AI enablement. Not so bold. AI meeting accounting. Maybe confusing or bewildering for some folks on the call. But you've told me, as we've discussed this, that this reminds you of something completely outside of accounting. So
Mm.
where do you want to start?
Well, actually, I would like to start with a factory, and I don't mean a metaphorical factory. I am talking about a real one, very much like the ones you're seeing on the screen.
Mhm.
America, early 1900s, the kind of factory that has brick walls, wooden floors, and the constant deafening noise of machinery. So for decades, these factories had been powered by steam, a single enormous steam engine, usually in the basement or
Mhm.
tucked away in one of the corners of the building, generated all the power the factory needed. And
Mhm.
because that engine sat in one fixed place, you didn't have to move, the factory wasn't designed around anything else but one thing and one thing only, which was how close uh, machines needed to be to that engine to receive power. And you
Mhm.
had conveyor belts and driver shafts, and you can see an example here on the image on the right that run the length of the building, and they drag that power to wherever it was needed. Now, you saw the images. You have to admit this was not elegant. It wasn't pretty, but there was a logic to it. Energy, if you recall, for those of you in the UK from GCSE physics, I don't know what that would be, Chris, for everyone in the US.
High school physics 101. Yep.
Uh, so if you remember those days, energy essentially is lost the further it travels through a belt and shaft system. So the closer your machine was to the engine, the more power it received, right? So the floor plan wasn't designed around production, it was designed around energy consumption. Every machine positioned not where it made sense for it to work, but rather where it could afford to be. So again, very simple idea. The more energy hungry a machine was, the closer it had to be to the steam engine, and the less energy it required, the further away it had to be. Now, at this point, it's when electricity enters the scene, and factory owners, being rational business people, made what seemed like an obvious decision. They replaced the steam engine with an electric motor.
Mhm.
Thing is, for years, almost nothing changes. Productivity, in fact, barely moves, which leaves economists absolutely baffled and scratching their heads. You have taken the most expensive, dangerous, inefficient part of the factory and replaced it with something cleaner, cheaper, and arguably more reliable. And so, by any logic, this should have worked, but it didn't.
Okay. Hold on. So this to recap, they swapped out, as you said, to use your words, the most dangerous, expensive part of the factory for something that is strictly speaking better in every measurable capacity, and it didn't help their production at all. That doesn't track, Dimitar.
It's That's exactly the case. And there's a good reason for it. They swapped that piece, but the factory plan remained exactly the same as it had always been. The layout did not change. They just literally took the
Mm.
steam engine and replaced it with an electric motor. And if we skip on to the next slide, I want to talk to you about what they actually, the factory owners, what they actually missed. They had this idea that electric power was a cheaper source of energy, which it was indeed. However, the key here was the steam power was centralized, and the electric power was not just a cheaper source of energy, but actually it was distributed source of energy. So what this means is that
Mm.
you don't need one giant motor anymore. You can in fact have a motor put at every single workstation in the factory. And the moment someone actually grasped that, the moment a factory owner looked at their floor plan and thought, wait, I don't have to do it this way anymore. This is when everything actually changes, right? They tore up the old floor plan, they redesigned the factory around workflow and not around power source. And you can see here on the slide, I've got an image of Henry Ford's assembly line, which is perhaps the best known innovation from that era. And the reason why I have
Yeah.
it here is because I want to point out one very important thing, that Henry Ford's assembly line wasn't a new machine. It was exactly what I'm describing. It was a new floor plan, but no new machinery actually was needed here. And so it's at this moment where productivity absolutely explodes. And today, this is considered one of the most dramatic economic step changes in modern industrial history. The important thing, however, is that it took them nearly 30 years from the arrival of electricity to this actually happening at scale.
Mm.
30, not 13. This is 30. And this was not because technology was bad or the thinking was bad. It wasn't slow. It was actually because the thinking was slow, not the technology.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So this is fascinating. Um, okay, now not to call you out, but I got to come back to something you mentioned earlier because this is fascinating, and Dimitar, I know you well. My next question for you is going to be like, as you said, you're not an accountant. You're a tech guy, okay? So my question is, why is a tech guy the one connecting these dots for, let's be blunt, a room full of people that are full of a room full of audit and tax people, bottom line? Because I mean, you're not an accountant by trade.
No, no. And I was upfront about this. I did say I was not an accountant. It takes probably like, I don't know, 10 seconds to, see this on my LinkedIn profile. I am a technology executive. I've spent my career at, I mentioned companies, I would believe people on the call know, Stack Overflow, Handshake. And my work has always essentially sat at the intersection of technology and industries that are in the middle of being transformed by that technology, right? So
Mm,
what I've noticed, and this is a pattern that shows up again and again, is that the most dangerous moment in any transformation isn't when the technology is bad. It's actually when the technology is just about good enough to feel like you're making progress while the systems around it remains completely unchanged. And I think that's the exact moment where you can wake up one morning and realize that you have wasted a decade. And so
Mm,
from the outside looking in, what I see happening in this industry right now, at least with AI, it looks almost identical to those factory floor plans in the 1910s. And I hate to say this, but we've seen this movie before. We know roughly how it ends.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Which leads me to this point here, Chris, which is the elephant in the room in many ways. There is a big problem at the heart of AI in professional services that almost nobody is talking about, or at least not directly, right?
Mhm.
And it's not the AI. The AI, I would say, is genuinely remarkable. The models are getting better faster than anyone could have predicted. I'm sure most people on the call have already seen the news about Kimi K3 model. The automation potential is real. In fact, we're benefiting from it as we speak. So
Yeah.
I'm not here to be a skeptic about that. The problem is what the AI relies on. Every AI tool in the industry, and I would probably say there are dozens of them now, depends on one thing to function correctly, and that is accurate, complete client data. That's it. That's the input. Everything else is downstream. And here's the uncomfortable truth, the thing that I said no one wants to talk about. Clients almost never provide accurate or complete data the first time.
Okay, okay. So I want to dive into that. Tell me more. When you say it's not the AI, it's what the AI relies on. It's the data. Walk me through what that actually looks like in the numbers. Okay,
Right.
because I know you, Suralink, has done a lot of research on this.
Correct. Yeah. So you can see it on the screen. The numbers are actually quite shocking. But just to put some context here, we ran this huge survey. We surveyed hundreds of financial and accounting professionals at the end of last year. And this was across the industry, just to emphasize, not our own customers, but this was the industry as a whole.
Yeah.
And again, you can see some of the numbers here on the screen. The one that really stands out is probably the first one that you see here, which is 89% of firms say receiving accurate, complete data from their clients is a consistent challenge, not an occasional problem, but rather a consistent challenge. That's pretty significant. Now, there's more to this though. More than half of client requests are not fulfilled completely on time or when during the first attempt.
Hmm.
And more than 70% of engagements fail to finish on time and within budget. And again, I think everyone here on the call can probably relate to that. And the one that I think is probably the most shocking one out of the lot is this one. 82% of clients say that information requests they receive from their firms are either unclear or time consuming, very often both. So you kind of end up in this weird situation where both sides are frustrated, both sides feel like the other one is creating the problem, and they're both pointing the finger at each other, which very much reminds me, Chris, of my favorite internet meme, which is a group of Spider-Men in a circle pointing the finger at each other. This is exactly what is happening here, and there's a good name for it. We, at least at Surelink, we call this the rework cycle.
Yeah.
And if we jump into the next slide, we would see actually what this looks like. Again, I'm more than confident that most folk on the call today would actually relate to this. Take a quick look, and now hold this picture in your mind. We're talking about an industry already caught up in a cycle of incomplete data, unclear requests, and constant back and forth. And now ask yourself this. What happens when you bolt an AI tool onto a workflow like this? The AI doesn't know that the data is wrong. It doesn't hesitate the same way maybe a junior associate might. It just takes whatever it's in front of it and produces an output. That's what you've asked for. It does it
Yeah.
fast, it does it confidently, and in this case, almost guaranteed completely wrong.
Hmm.
So what I'm getting at, Chris, is that you haven't actually solved the rework cycle. We've just automated it. You would know this. We say this in tech a lot, right? Bad data in, bad data out. In this particular case, actually, is bad data in, bad AI out, right? It happens with
Just
speed.
yeah, just at speed now.
Exactly. With less scrutiny, less time to catch it before it causes big problems. And there have been already a number of instances where that has actually happened in the industry. Um, and this is exactly the electric motor plugged into the old floor plan. Nothing else changes. You've just taken one tool and replaced it with another.
Mm. Well, this is I mean, this is a brutal cycle. I know is painful for everyone on this call. Talking about the data, when Suralink recently launched its client data vault
Mhm.
a product, right, which I've been working intensely with, and I've spent a lot of time actually talking to clients, and like that 82%, the last number you talked about too, like that finger pointing, it goes both ways from the client's perspective. Like they feel they're not getting what they need, and that which was shocking to me,
Yeah.
utterly shocking. But as we're analyzing this, obviously in the lens of our industry, this is a problem I don't think is, I mean, as you said, it's not specific to accounting. Um, has anyone actually figured out how to get ahead of this outside of our industry, outside of accounting?
Yeah, I mean, we can see the slide already there. I don't know if this is necessarily getting out of it, but I do want to tell you a little bit more about a company I know well. I mentioned them earlier, Handshake. Again, for folk joining us from the US, I would imagine everyone knows Handshake is the largest graduate job site essentially in the world,
Yeah.
certainly in the US. Most graduates in the US land their first job on Handshake nowadays, and not to LinkedIn. Actually, their second and third job as well. Now, it's interesting that Handshake as a job site, if you will, has been around for a good 12 years now. So it's not a special business. It's been around for 12 years. I had the privilege of actually launching Handshake in EMEA about 6 years ago now, and I worked there for a number of years. Um, what's interesting about Handshake is that about 2 years ago, I think around Christmas 2024, Garrett, who's one of the co-founders and CEO, decided that he was going to launch a side AI business, which at the time seemed absolutely ludicrous. How would a job site launch an AI business, right? And again, at that point, by the way, even when I was there, it was an established business doing around 100 million in revenue. But launching an AI business just seemed pretty crazy a couple of years ago. Now, where this story gets interesting is that if you fast forward a year from that Christmas Eve when he came up with the idea, that new side business called Handshake AI, everyone can go and check it out. It's already doing reportedly at the time anywhere from 5 to 10 million, which is by all measures very impressive.
Mm.
From a complete cold start, you're hitting about 10 million in revenue in year one. But where I think, Chris, the story gets absolutely wild is where this business is today, 12 months from that particular point. And that business, I heard just the other day, Garrett doing an interview, is actually approaching 1 billion with a B in revenue. A hundred
Good
times
grief.
growth, 100 times growth in 12 months, which is absolutely bonkers. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this story is because, again, Handshake didn't build a foundational model. It's not the type of company that went and hired an army of machine learning engineers and put them to work. What they had and what, the business had been quietly been building for over a decade, including when I was there, was a network of some 1,600 universities. And within that network, Handshake had just over 500,000 PhDs,
Mm.
lawyers, doctors, accountants, specialists, essentially. And it turned out that what the Frontier Labs desperately needed and what they desperately need right now is it's not more compute, it's actually expertise, real human nuanced expertise to train on and to validate against. And Handshake owned that data. They didn't know they were necessarily sitting on an AI gold mine. At least, I didn't think so back in 2000, 2020, 21, 22. But when the moment came, the asset was there and they have executed absolutely flawlessly. And look, the reason why I'm sharing the story is to basically illustrate one lesson and one lesson only, and that is that the most valuable asset in the AI era is not the model. It's actually the right data in the right form at the right time. And so
Mm.
this kind of leads us to perhaps what is the biggest takeaway, I think, at least for me, from this whole presentation. And this is that the firms that will define professional services in the next decade, let's say, won't have the best AI. They will be the ones who actually had the best data, clean, complete, structured at the start of every engagement. That would be
Mm.
the main takeaway for me for this presentation.
Okay. So if the winners are the ones with the best data,
Mm,
coming back to our industry,
yeah.
what does that actually look like day to day for an engagement team?
Yeah. Well, So I guess the question is, what does it look like to redesign, to use the same metaphor, to continue with the same metaphor? What does it look like to redesign the floor, right?
Yeah.
So when let's go back to this. When the factory owners finally cracked it, I think they essentially asked a fundamentally different question. They didn't ask, how do we get a better motor? No, what they asked was, if power is no longer the constraint, how should this factory actually work? What should the layout look like? And the equivalent question for accounting firms today is, if AI could be present at every point in this engagement, where should it start? And the answer, once you say it out loud, is obvious. It should start at the beginning, at the moment a client receives a request for information, at the moment data enters the engagement, right? So if you get the moment right, if the request is clear and specific, if the data that comes back is complete and correctly formatted, then everything downstream gets easier. And I mean dramatically easier. Your AI tools have something real to work with. The rework cycle that we spoke about doesn't start. The engagement actually runs on the timeline it was supposed to run on. So this is, and I want to really emphasize on this, this is not a point solution. We have not taken one tool and replaced it with another. This is a different way of thinking about the entire engagement, from the first request to the final report. This is a way of thinking of the engagement as a single connected system, right?
Mhm.
So again, not a point solution, integrated system.
Okay. Well, to be provocative, I can already hear someone on this call thinking, and we have some questions in Q&A already. Well, basically, okay, we bought an AI tool last year. Doesn't that count?
Right. Well, right. Let's go back to the factory floor one last time, and I'll try to answer in this
Yeah.
here. So put it this way: the owners who replaced the steam engine with an electric motor and called it done, who reasonably felt that they were keeping up, that they had adopted the new technology, I hate to say it, most of them aren't around anymore. And this is not because they were incompetent, not because they didn't invest, quite the opposite. It was just because they kept the old floor plan, right? And I would argue we are exactly at that moment right now in this industry. As I said before, AI is not the question. AI actually is a given. It's here, it's real, and every firm on the call is either already adopting it or at the very least planning to. So the question isn't whether to use AI, the question is whether you're redesigning the floor plan or just plugging in a new motor.
Hmm.
Because here's the thing, Chris, that I believe, having watched technology transform industry for 15 plus years, the firms that will define professional services in the 10 years, next 10 years time, will not be the ones who bought the best AI tools. I said that already. What I believe will happen, the firms who will define the industry will be the ones with the best data, clean, complete, structured at the start of every engagement, or at least that's the insight that the factory owners eventually found. Is it just took them 30 years, right? And I don't think we've got 30 years here.
No,
That's
no.
uh that's all I've got for you today.
Well, I think it's an incredibly important point. Um, and I do think this is a great place to pause and like we do have some questions in Q&A to get to. But I know you just said it recently, but I want to reiterate it. If this if the folks on this webinar remember only one thing from today,
Mhm.
one thing they should take away, what should it be?
Can I cheat and give you two?
Sure.
Well, so I'll give you two. The first one was this distinction between a point solution and an integrated system. The two kind of go hand in hand together. And so when you think of AI, it's very important to basically distinguish between that concept of having a point solution where we are changing and replacing an existing tool with a better tool. Again, I think the trick, if you really want to benefit and accelerate with the AI adoption, is to actually think of the integrated system approach and what the entire workflow needs to look like um, to be successful. And the derivative of that, I suppose, is the other thing I mentioned, which is in the context of accounting, everything starts with the quality of data. Actually, not just accounting anywhere. Again, I could keep on harping on about this, but if you have bad, incomplete, unstructured data, you're merely automating the rework cycle that we spoke about instead of actually solving it. So get your data right to begin with. That's already like a huge improvement. And from there, when you start thinking of AI adoption, don't just approach it as a, hey, we're going to replace one tool with another, but actually think, what does this mean for the entire organization and how does it work as an integrated system rather than a point solution?
Hmm.
Is this helpful?
Yes, I don't think I could have said it better. Okay, I do want to pull on that thread though, because we have a great question already in Q&A. But right now, guys, we have about 5 minutes left in the webinar, so we have time to get to one or two, maybe two questions. Let's open it up. If you haven't already, some of you have, drop your questions into the Q&A panel right here in Zoom. And again, we'll get through what we can here in the next 5 minutes or so. And again, if you don't get to your question live, we will follow up with you directly afterwards. Okay, first question coming in. Practical question, very pulling on the thread that you just weaved. Okay, so it says all makes sense, but where do we actually start? We don't have the budget to rip out our whole tech stack overnight.
Hmm. Yeah, well, great question. First of all, I'm, by the way, not suggesting that you go and do that. So I guess the practical answer is almost embarrassingly simple. Again, I kind of said that, but start at the front door, right? So just being very practical, pick one engagement, ideally one that's already really frustrating you. Um, the client whose team uploads whatever they find first. Everyone can think of one, right? The one where your seniors lose a week every year on document triage before the real work starts. So pick one of those and then run that engagement through a process designed to catch the problem at intake rather than 2 weeks downstream, right? So don't change anything else, just that one engagement, right? The reason I suggest starting there rather than somewhere in the middle of the workflow is that intake is where errors tend to compound. A document collected incorrectly or an incomplete document at week one costs you differently than a document reviewed incorrectly, let's say at week 3 or 4. So one creates a rework loop, and we saw that. The other one creates a restatement risk, let's say. So this is where I will start. Get the number from that one pilot, and this could be anything. You track hours saved, requests fulfilled correctly the first time, reduction in client response time, and then let the number make the budget case if you're trying to build a case for this. That's where I would start, at least.
Mm, good answer. Um, Good answer, and it makes
You said
sense.
practical, right? So hopefully this
Yeah.
is right.
Well, okay, and we only have a couple minutes left, but we just had another question. We have a few more questions in Q&A, but we had one come through just recently. I think is I would like to answer live if we can, because it's very salient. Um, s- we have someone saying we've always said we need to train our clients to give us tax information better. How do we accomplish this though? And to me, I think you've answered a good point of that. AI is a great way to do that. And again, folks, this is supposed to be a thought leadership webinar. We're not supposed to really. Our plan wasn't really to talk about product today, but I can tell you, at least from Suralink's standpoint, that's been the huge focus of our recently released cloud testing suite, specifically with Document Prescreen Agent, where the idea is that at the front door, the moment the client literally uploads their documentation, having AI literally catch things that are incorrect or not what are being asked for immediately and displaying that to the client immediately. Okay, so literally training by triage. Um, that's something that we've found, especially early on when we were betaing this product, to be wildly successful. But again, allowing the system to be the one that before an auditor ever even sees the documentation, potentially to have a good AI agent at that front door that can respond appropriately, and they'll learn by hook or by crook. Um, okay, we are at time. We have a few other questions in Q&A. We will respond to you. Um, Calling out by name specifically. There's been a few others, but yeah, we will respond to you. Um, Dimitar, this has been an incredibly enjoyable discussion. Thank you for your time today and for sharing these insights. For those watching again, if you would like to ensure that your own factory floor is running properly with AI, and you, especially in answer to some of your questions, would like to see directly how these data first approaches are manifesting right now, today, live in Suralink, please email us right here on screen or scan the QR code here. Thank you all for attending and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.